Hi folks. Today, the 16th of April, is, as some of you may know, the anniversary of the Battle of Culloden in 1746, which I think is 274 years ago. And I'm sure there would be many posts appearing about this on social media. A lot of them, unfortunately, will probably be highly romanticised versions of what actually happened. Scottish history, at its very best, tends to be full of myths, legends, and half-truths. And in my view, Culloden is probably one of the events that suffers most from this. So today, on the anniversary of that terrible encounter up near Inverness, I thought I would give you my take on the battle and why it happened. First though, I would really like to get rid of a couple of myths so that I think you can gain a better understanding of what happened. Number one, and probably the main one, this was not a battle between the Scots and the English. The conflict at Culloden was between a British government army and an army of Jacobite rebels who wished to usurp that government. So it was in no way, a national battle. Many Scotsmen fought in the government army, including many Highlanders. Whilst the Jacobite army contained many French soldiers and Irish mercenaries who were fighting for money. This battle, the Battle of Culloden, was all about Prince Charles Edward Stuart's last throw of the dice, as you might say it, in his abortive effort to grab the crown of Great Britain for himself. That was what he was after. It was nothing to do with Scotland and England. And the second point that I think is worth clarifying is that this was in no way part of some great revolution. Sometimes people portray the Jacobite Rebellion as part of a popular revolution, and nothing really could be further from the truth. And this is not the case. The Jacobite Rebellion of 1745-1746 largely came about because Britain and France were at war on the European continent, and the French weren't doing too well, and they used the Jacobite cause and Bonnie Prince Charlie as a means to divert British resources and soldiers from the battlefields of Europe. Very few people in Scotland and England actually supported the Jacobites, and this was, I think, highly evidenced when Prince Charles and his army marched, throughout Scotland and into England as far as the Midlands, and hardly anybody joined their cause. In fact, Glasgow, the Scottish city that supported the British Crown the most, the Glasgow was hugely supportive of the British Crown, paid the Jacobites a massive ransom not to enter their city. So this was a rebellion by a minority who wished to change the government, and that's what it was all about. So the Battle of Culloden came about, and for this we have to go back a few months, because the Jacobites had managed at the start of their campaign to progress quite far south, and had some victories in battles. This had largely come about because, as we said, the British Army was engaged with the French on the continent, and the British troops that the Jacobite army had come up against were largely local militias, pretty much untrained, and certainly untested in battle. However, once the Jacobite army reaches Derby, which is in the Midlands of England, News come to them, or they discover, that 3 British armies, newly returned from the battlefields of France, are marching to confront them. So, this was a completely different kettle of fish, if you don't mind me using that expression. These armies that were encircling them, really, consisted of men who were all highly trained and battle hardened. So, Charles's advisors, all of them, to a man, as far as I can understand, insisted the Jacobite army must retreat immediately. Charles was totally against this. He wished to march on, although how he was going to confront 3 armies, that one in front and one to either side, is beyond me. However, but he was forced to give way, and he gave the order. Apparently he then went into a major sulk and refused to speak to anyone, which is hardly the actions I would have said of a commander-in-chief. However, be that as it may, the Jacobite army retreats rapidly, and eventually finds itself back up in Inverness in the Highlands in late January, I think it was, of 1746, in the winter. The Duke of Cumberland, in charge of one of the British armies, meanwhile, he makes his way up the east coast of the country, thereby ensuring that he's regularly supplied with food and supplies from British naval ships coming up the coast. And eventually he camps at Nairn, just outside Inverness. So they are there, the Jacobites at Inverness, and about 20 miles away, I would say, Nairn is, the Duke of Cumberland with the British army. Charles now decides that this is the place the Jacobites must stand and fight. And this is where I disagree with a lot of people. Some historians feel that he had no option. Really, his back was to the wall, they're at Inverness, and this is where it's going to be. I disagree with that. The Jacobites were never going to win this battle. And I feel that the best option for them was to disperse and to conduct some form of ongoing guerrilla warfare, which they could easily have done in the Highlands. However, no, Charles decides, we stand here and we fight. But then I think there's 2 issues then that he doesn't do, which I think reflect badly on him. Number 1, he didn't pick the best site, the best location on which to fight. They looked at 3 options, but actually in their dithering, the site where the battle was actually fought on, Drumossie Moor, ended up largely being determined by the British Army's position. And it was not advantageous to the Jacobites. The Jacobites, the way they fought, they had the same tactic. The Highlanders would just charge. That was their tactic. The Highlanders charge. And Drumossie Moor was a flat, boggy moorland in which the Highlanders would have to charge across the flat into the waiting arms, potentially, of the British Army, with its muskets, cannon and artillery. That's not an option I think I would have chosen. Nor also does he ensure that his men are properly fed, watered, and rested. So this is the winter, the weather is bad, and he's not looking after his men. Actually, as the battle was happening, many Jacobites were scouring Inverness and the surrounding areas to get food. They hadn't been fed, and they were soaked to the skin, and many of them hadn't slept the night before. Contrast that with the British Army, who are encamped in an encampment in Nairn, rested, and had been given extra rations and drink by the Duke of Cumberland the day before to celebrate his birthday. So this is how we end up on Drumossie Moor. This is why we end up there. The long retreat, the indecision, the bad choices. And so, on that morning, 16th of April, 274 years ago today. It was a rain-soaked morning. The British Army commenced as they would, and they started first with a formidable artillery barrage, which lasted half an hour. Initially they shot, round shot, which would be the cannonballs, but then lethally they turned to use grape shot, which is lots and lots of small pieces which can blast out over a wide area, and this caused great harm and killed many in the Jacobite army, who had no artillery of any worth to respond. So finally Charles issues the orders for his Highlanders to charge the massed ranks of British muskets and bayonets. Now, although hampered by and slowed down by this boggy flat ground that they're running across in the rain and in the sleet, many of the Highlanders actually reach the government lines, and terrible bloody hand-to-hand fighting ensues. The British Army had developed a new tactic, which they used here, whereby a soldier in the line would bayonet the man to the exposed side of the man to his right, so he wouldn't attempt to bayonet the assailant that's charging him, because he would probably have a shield up and he'd certainly have a weapon and everything like that. What they would do is turn slightly to the right and bayonet the person that's on the right hand side into their side of the body. And apparently they used this to devastating effect on that day. However, the Jacobite army, the Highlanders, finally broke and fled the field. The battle was all over in less than an hour. 2,000 Highlanders, 2,000 died on that day on Drumossie Moor. Compared to losses in the British Army, they think of only about 50 on that day. It was an overwhelming defeat and marked the end of the Jacobite Rebellion. Whilst I personally feel the Battle of Culloden should never have taken place, and it showed again, I thought, the poor strategic capabilities of Prince Charles Edward Stuart. What I think has to be stressed, and what can never be taken away, is the amazing valour and courage of those Highlanders, half-starved, soaking wet, without rest. They chose, because I feel of outdated clan loyalties, to charge across that moor right into the arms of probably, at that time, one of the best trained armies in the world. And because of that, for 2,000 of them, that rain-sodden moor became their sad final resting place. Well, as ever, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this little historical insight, giving you my view on the battle on this day, its anniversary. If you liked it, as usual, give me a wee like and share it with your friends. I hope, again, as ever, you are taking care of yourself and looking after yourself in these difficult times. And until we meet again, I just want to continue to wish you all the best from Scotland.